Okay, well, thank you for joining me. Um, we're going to be reading chapter 5, or the beginning of chapter 5, in Joseph Campbell's Primitive Mythology. And chapter 5 is entitled The Ritual of Death. Section 1 is The Descent and Return of the Maiden. A rite similar in conception to that of the young couple of the Vestal Fire, though functioning in the context of a more primitive mythology, is reported from the opposite margin of the Indian Ocean zone, 7,000 or 8,000 miles from East Africa and the Sudan, among the Marind Anim of Dutch South New Guinea. The Swiss ethnologist Paul Viers, in a 2-volume work on the myths and customs of these head-hunting cannibals, tells of their gods the Dima, who appear in the ceremonies fabulously costumed to enact again, or rather not again, because time collapses in ceremonial time, what was then becomes now. The world-fashioning events of the time of the beginning of the world. The rites are performed to the tireless chant of many voices, the boom of slit-log drums, and the whirring of the bull-roars, which are the voices of the Dima themselves, rising from the earth. The ceremonies continue for many nights, many days, uniting the villagers in a fused being that is not biological, essentially, but a living spirit with numerous heads, many eyes, many voices, numerous feet pounding the earth, lifted even out of temporality and translated into the no place, no time, no when, no where of the mythological age, which is here and now. The particular moment of importance to our story occurs at the conclusion of one of the boys' puberty rites, which terminates in a sexual orgy of several days and nights, during which everyone in the village except the initiates makes free with everybody else. Amid the tumult of the mythological chants, drums, and bull-roars, until the final night, when a fine young girl, painted, oiled, and ceremonially costumed, is led into the dancing ground and made to lie beneath a platform of very heavy logs. With her in open view of the festival, the initiates cohabit, one after another, and while the youth chosen to be last is embracing her, the supports of the logs above are jerked away and the platform drops, to a prodigious boom of drums. A hideous howl goes up, and the dead girl and boy are dragged from the logs, cut up, roasted, and eaten. But what can be the sense of such a cruel game? And who are this annihilated girl and boy? What is the background of such rites, which are not frequent merely, but typical among the cannibal gardeners of the widely dispersed equatorial villages? As Professor Adolf Jensen of Frankfurt has pointed out, developing the broadly reaching cross-cultural theory first announced by Leo Frobenius in 1895–97, these rites are but the renditions in the act of a mythology inspired by the model of death and life in the plant world, and they are the basal sacrament of a precisely definable prehistoric culture stratum that's still represented in tropical Africa and America, as well as in India, Indonesia, and Oceania. The unity of the broken field has not been explained, nor is it easy to imagine how it should be. Yet neither was it easy to understand the distribution of the animal known as the tapir, which is found both in the Malay region and in South and Central America, but nowhere between, until fossil forms in Miocene, Pliocene, and Pleistocene formations were found in Europe, China, and the United States of America, which made possible a reconstruction of the history of the animal's diffusion, No biologist previous to the discovery of these fossils would have dreamed of suggesting that the New World and Old World tapirs might have developed separately through parallel lines of evolution. And in the field of comparative mythology too, perhaps it would be well not to formulate scientific conclusions before a full accounting is made. The contemporary representatives of the prehistoric culture stratum of the cannibal gardeners dwell in tropical, usually jungle regions, sparsely populated, where the natural abundance of the plant world affords a convenient supply of food: coconuts, the pith of the sago palm, bananas and other fruits, and in California, a variety of acorn. In addition, there is generally practiced an orderly and often highly ritualized cultivation of tubers. Yams, for example, taro, and the sweet potato, rice, and the other grains belonging almost certainly to a later stratum of culture. In general, the architecture is elaborately developed, usually set on piles, and frequently includes gigantic structures, 200 yards or more in length, sheltering whole communities, which may number as many as 100 persons. Bamboo is prominent and variously used. Among the beasts domesticated are the dog, the chicken, turkey in America, and often the pig throughout Melanesia and Indonesia, or the goat in Africa. The arts of metalwork, weaving, and usually pottery are unknown, though imports of these goods are highly prized. And politically, there are no great state confederations, kings, professional priests, or significant differentiations of labor, except, of course, along sexual lines. While the village, as a cult community, usually ranks higher than any tribal organization. The prehistoric period to which the development of this particular style of life and thought should be assigned cannot be precisely identified. The archaeology of the problem is vague and has not been pressed very far. The characteristic artifacts are of extremely perishable materials: bamboo, pandanus leaves, shell and bone, feathers, palm fronds, and logs, withies, and beaten bark. Furthermore, the greater part of the region occupied has been the home of man for at least 500,000 years. The bones of Pithecanthropus erectus circa 400,000 BC were turned up in Java, and in Africa even earlier remains have been found in abundance. The cultural life of the area stands indeed as a kind of enduring, though vanishing counterpoise to the more durably registered stone and metal ages of the temperate north. It is a culture world in which the forms endure, but not the materials in which they are rendered. Whereas in the world of stone tools and metal, it is the materials that last. The prehistoric origin of this primitive gardening syndrome must float enigmatically, therefore, in a loose relationship to the comparatively firm schedule of our various Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic ages. Jensen is inclined to refer to the early Neolithic, or perhaps even one step back to the Mesolithic. And if his view is correct, we are viewing here a form of culture not far removed in time of origin from the proto-Neolithic villages of the Near East. It was in the course of an expedition to West Ceram, the next major island westward of New Guinea, that Professor Jensen discovered the myth that I present here as our first example from this cannibalistic culture stratum, that of the maiden Hainuwele, whose name means frond of the cocoa palm, and who is one of 3 virgin dama highly revered among the tribes of West Ceram. The myth is, 9 families of mankind came forth in the beginning from Mount Nunusaku, where the people had emerged from clusters of bananas, and these families stopped in West Ceram at a place known as the 9 Dance Grounds, which is in the jungle between Ohiolo and Veruloan. Now there was a man among them whose name was Amida, meaning dark, black, or night, and neither was he married nor had he children. He went off one day, hunting with his dog, and after a little the dog smelt a wild pig, which it traced to a pond into which the animal took flight. But the dog remained on the shore, and the pig, swimming, grew tired and drowned. But the man, who had arrived meanwhile, retrieved it, and he found a cocoanut on its tusk, though at the time there were no cocoa palms in the world. Returning to his hut, Amida placed the nut on a stand and covered it with a cloth bearing a snake design, then lay down to sleep. And in the night there appeared to him the figure of a man who said, "The cocoanut that you placed upon the stand and covered with a cloth you must plant in the earth, otherwise it won't grow." So Amida planted the cocoanut the next morning, and in 3 days the palm was tall. Again 3 days, and it was bearing blossoms. He climbed the tree to cut the blossoms, from which he wished to prepare himself a drink. But as he cut, he slashed his finger, and the blood fell on a leaf. He returned home to bandage his finger, and in 3 days came back to the palm to find that where the blood on the leaf had mingled with the sap of the cut blossom, the face of someone had appeared. 3 days later, the trunk of a person was there, and when he returned again in 3 days, he found that a little girl had developed from his drop of blood. That night the same figure of a man appeared to him in a dream. "Take your cloth with the snake design," he said, "wrap the girl of the cocoa palm in the cloth carefully and carry her home." So the next morning Amida went with his cloth to the cocoa palm, climbed the tree, and carefully wrapped up the little girl. He descended cautiously, took her home, and named her Hanuele. She grew quickly, and in 3 days was a nubile maiden. But she was not like an ordinary person, for when she would answer the call of nature, her excrement consisted of all sorts of valuable articles, such as Chinese dishes and gongs, so that her father became very rich. And about that time there was to be celebrated in the place of the 9 dance grounds a great Maro dance, which was to last 9 full nights, and the 9 families of mankind were to participate. Now when the people dance the Maro, the women sit in the center, and from there reach betel nut to the men, who form in dancing a large 9-fold spiral. Hanuele stood in the center at this Maro festival, passing out betel nut to the men, and at dawn, when the performance ended, all went home to sleep. The second night the 9 families of mankind assembled on the second ground. For when the Maro is celebrated, it must be performed each night in a different place. And once again it was Hanuele who was placed in the center to reach betel nut to the dancers. But when they asked for it, she gave them coral instead, which they all found very nice. The dancers and the others too then began pressing in to ask for betel, and she gave them coral. And so the performance continued until dawn, when they all went home to sleep. The next night the dance was resumed on a third ground, with Hanuele again at the center. But this time she gave beautiful Chinese porcelain dishes, and everyone present received such a dish. The fourth night she gave bigger porcelain dishes, and the fifth great bush knives. The sixth beautifully worked betel boxes of copper, the seventh golden earrings, and the eighth glorious gongs. The value of the articles increased that way from night to night, and the people thought this thing mysterious. They came together and discussed the matter. They were all extremely jealous that Hanuele could distribute such wealth, and decided to kill her. The ninth night, therefore, when the girl was again placed in the center of the dance ground to pass out betel nut, the men dug a deep hole in the area. In the innermost circle of the great 9-fold spiral, the men of the Lyciella family were dancing, and in the course of the slowly cycling movement of their spiral, they pressed the maiden, Hanuele, toward the hole and threw her in. A loud three-voiced marrow song drowned out her cries. They covered her quickly with earth, and the dancers trampled us down firmly with their steps. They danced on till dawn, when the festival ended and the people returned to their huts. But when the morrow festival ended and Hanawele failed to return, her father knew that she had been killed. He took 9 branches of a certain bush-like plant whose wood is used in the casting of oracles, and with these reconstructed in his home the 9 circles of the morrow dancers. Then he knew that Hanawele had been killed in the dancing ground. He took 9 fibers of the cocoa palm leaf and went with these to the dance place, stuck them one after another into the earth, and with the 9th came to what had been the innermost circle. When he stuck the 9th fiber into the earth and drew it forth, on it were some of the hairs and blood of Hanawele. He dug up the corpse and cut it into many pieces, which he buried in the whole area about the dancing ground, except for the 2 arms which he carried to the maiden Satene, the second of the supreme Demivirgins of West Saram. At the time of the coming into being of mankind, Satene had emerged from an unripe banana, whereas the rest had come from ripe bananas, and she now was the ruler of them all. But the buried portions of Hanawele, meanwhile, were already turning into things that up to that time had never existed anywhere on earth. Above all, certain tuberous plants that have been the principal food of the people ever since. Amida cursed mankind, and the maiden Satene was furious at the people for having killed. So she built on one of the dance grounds a great gate, consisting of a 9-fold spiral, like the one formed by the men in the dance, and she stood on a great log inside this gate, holding in her 2 hands the 2 arms of Hanawele. Then, summoning the people, she said to them, "Because you have killed, I refuse to live here any more. Today I shall leave, and so now you must all try to come to me through this gate. Those who succeed will remain people, but to those who fail, something else will happen." They tried to come through the spiral gate, but not all succeeded, and everyone who failed was turned into either an animal or a spirit. That is how it came about that pigs, deer, birds, fish, and many spirits inhabit the earth. Before that time, there had been only people. Those, however, who came through walked to Satene, some to the right of the log on which he was standing, others to the left, and as each passed, she struck him with one of Hanawele's arms. Those going left had to jump across 5 sticks of bamboo, those to the right across 9. And from these 2 groups respectively were derived the tribes known as the Fivers and the Niners. Satene said to them, "I am departing today, and you will see me no more on the earth. Only when you die will you again see me. Yet even then you shall have to accomplish a very difficult journey before you attain me." And with that she disappeared from the earth. She now dwells on the mountain of the dead, in the southern part of West Saram, and whoever desires to go to her must die. But the way to her mountains leads over 8 other mountains, and ever since that day there have been not only men, but spirits and animals on the earth, while the tribes of men have been divided into the Fivers and the Niners. A related myth tells of the remaining divine maiden, Rabia, who was desired in marriage by the sun-man Tuwale. But when her parents placed a dead pig in her place in the bridal bed, Tuwale claimed his bride in a strangely violent manner, causing her to sink into the earth among the roots of a tree. The efforts of the people to save her were in vain. They could not prevent her from sinking even deeper. And when she had gone down as far as to the neck, she called to her mother, It is Tuale, the Sun Man, who has come to claim me. Slaughter a pig and celebrate a feast, for I am dying. But in 3 days, when the evening comes, look up at the sky, where I shall be shining upon you as a light. That was how the Moon Maiden Rabia instituted the death feast. And when her relatives had killed the pig and celebrated the death feast for 3 days, they saw for the first time the moon rising in the east. So that ends the first section of chapter 5. Hope you enjoyed it. Next time we'll be reading section 2, the mythological event. Hope you have a great day.